So here's a couple misconceptions about knowing. One is that there's this bank of knowledge that exists outside of us. There isn't. It's free flowing. And so that leads to the belief that if we know the right things to do, we can keep ourselves out of trouble somehow. But really, it's always being streamed to us. Not streamed, it's more direct than that. It never becomes not direct. In fact, direct is too indirect of a term to describe it. Another is that knowledge is knowing how something is to the exclusion of how it isn't. So I know that 2 + 2 is 4, and I know that it's not 5. I can recognize when it's not 5. Well, yes, this is how knowledge works, and yes, this is how thought works. But when we take this away from feeling, we're lost. And we're willing to stick with the knowledge, which isn't direct, and hope that it leads us somewhere when there's nowhere we can really go. So there's no separation. That separation never becomes, and we can never actually know. So all knowledge is based on separation. And the very best analogy, the most fun, enjoyable analogy in my opinion, is how color is apparently created, or how science explains color. So the grass behind me, that's a vivid green. It appears green because it's rejecting the wavelength of yellow and blue or green, and it's absorbing all of the others. So in that way, things are completely backwards, and this is exactly how our psychology or our thinking works. So what we accept about ourselves isn't what we attract or how we appear. It's hard to describe from that, but we are all of it. We're not neutral. We're unique expressions, apparently, but always in movement and always beyond it, encompassing and beyond. So talking about non-duality gets a little tricky because it's like each analogy has a flip side, or everything you say about it could be said in complete opposites and can lead to the same understanding. And so it's said by several teachers that it's a pointing. It's not the thing that it's pointed to, and nor do you ever become the thing, or does it ever become the thing. But you can understand how if someone's in a different direction, you point in different directions. So I've never done this before, but I wanted to talk about both sides of an analogy. And if you're explaining to someone how they're not actually separate, how there's no outside world and there's no them, one of the very best analogies, and such a simple thing, is the analogy of consuming food. So we are what we eat. We become what we eat. We're taking it upon ourselves. And so communion, what Jesus spoke about with communion, sounds so creepy to people, where he said, "Eat my body, drink my blood." And you could interpret it as a form of, if you see the Buddha, kill him. But also that he was simply pointing to non-duality. He was simply pointing that there was no separation between you and him. And this is how we heal things. This is how, when we feel that separation, when we feel the discord of it, when we finally listen to the discord, it's like we're eating up those negative emotions, or we're eating up those judgments. And this could be called you could describe it as clearing karma, but it's seen that those things aren't actually separate. It's felt that those things aren't actually separate. And so communion, this is communion. This is, I'm with it, I am it. And the other way to describe, to use this analogy, is that we eat beliefs that feel bad, and we do this to try to hide things. It's like sweeping something under the rug. And not the prettiest analogy, but it was kind of obvious that this was the direction that contemplations were going because of the timing of me seeing this. But I went out to see my dog, and she lives with my parents because she had some temperament issues. She was rescued, and she was very happy at my parents. My parents were happy to have her. But when I had my son, it wasn't safe to have her in the home with him. So I was very lucky that she took her, and so I see her every day. And she's 14. She's turning 14 in 10 days, and she's senile. And I'd never seen her do this before. She's always been perfectly potty trained and everything, but she had had an accident, and I saw her eating it to take care of it. And it possibly, you could say that this was because she didn't want to be caught, or she wanted it to go away out of her space or something, but it was very much like she was eating it, something that was not meant to be eaten whatsoever, that was meant to be rejected, and she was eating it to get rid of it out of embarrassment. In the same way, we believe things, and we attempt to get rid of things, not seeing that we're consuming them or taking them on and they're unfit for consumption. And seeing a belief is that it feels bad to think, a thought that feels bad to think, and just dropping it, rejecting it, not trying to eat it. That's one of the best analogies. And listening to that feeling, to that real time knowing always streaming to you, is so powerful and will change your life. And it still happens to me where I see a judgment I didn't notice, and I see what's there for me, and there's so much joy to be unveiled. It's like gifts. It's like gifts in horrible wrapping paper. There's so much there for you. There's so much to be unveiled.